The lavender bloom, a prince's true love. Prince Edward of the Kingdom of Solara had known only wealth and luxury his entire life. From the moment he was born, he was surrounded by grandeur and opulence. His father, King Aldrich, ruled a vast and prosperous kingdom, one where every need was met with the snap of a finger. Yet, despite all the riches and privileges, there was a void in Edward's heart that no amount of wealth or power could fill. As the only heir to the throne, Edward was expected to marry well, to form alliances with noble families that would ensure the kingdom's continued strength. But Edward was different from most princes. He did not care for political unions or strategic marriages. What he sought, more than anything, was true love, a love that was not tainted by titles, power, or wealth. A love that was genuine, unpretentious, and pure. Every year, noble women from all over the kingdom vied for his attention, each one more beautiful and refined than the last. But to Edward, their beauty felt hollow. He could see that many of them sought his hand not for love, but for the prestige of being married to the prince. His heart remained untouched, longing for something more. One early morning, weary of the palace's constant intrigue and pressure, Edward decided to ride out into the countryside. He had no particular destination in mind, only the hope that the fresh air would clear his thoughts and help him escape the suffocating expectations of royal life. The wind in his hair, the soft thud of hooves on the earth, it was the peace he needed. As he rode along the winding path, he passed through fields of swaying golden wheat and rows of humble cottages. The further he rode, the more he felt himself being drawn away from the politics of the court and closer to the simplicity of the land. His heart lifted with each passing mile, the burden of his royal duties momentarily forgotten. When he reached the riverbank, however, he was caught by a sight that stopped him in his tracks. There, kneeling by the water's edge, was a young woman. She was wearing a simple dress of faded blue, her hair tied back in a loose braid, and she was picking flowers from the riverbank. There was a quiet grace in the way she moved, and Edward found himself entranced by the sight of her. She was different from the noble women he had known. She was not adorned with jewels or fine fabrics, yet there was a beauty in her simplicity that seemed to shine brighter than any crown. He dismounted from his horse, his gaze fixed on her as she gently caressed each petal, as though the flowers themselves were precious beyond measure. "Those are lovely flowers," Edward said softly, breaking the stillness of the moment. The young woman looked up, startled by his voice, but then her expression softened. She smiled, a warm and genuine smile that made Edward's heart skip a beat. "Nature's beauty should be cherished, my lord," she said, her voice light but wise. Edward was taken aback by her grace and humility. Most noble women would have addressed him with formality, but this girl spoke to him with a kindness that felt like a breath of fresh air. He could sense that there was no pretense in her words, no hidden agenda. She spoke from the heart. He stepped closer, drawn to her in a way he could not explain. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of curiosity. "My name is Isabella," she replied, standing up from her crouched position. "I live in the village just beyond the woods." Edward smiled, his heart stirring in a way it had never done before. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Isabella," he said. "I'm Prince Edward." The mention of his title seemed to surprise her, but instead of reacting with awe or deference, she simply nodded politely. "It is an honor, Your Highness," she said, but her tone was so gentle, so free of the usual courtly protocol, that it only made Edward feel more comfortable in her presence. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking, with Edward learning that Isabella was not a noble woman, but a simple village girl. She spoke of her love for nature, her connection to the land, and her deep belief in kindness and compassion. As they conversed, Edward found himself hanging on every word. Her wisdom and humility captivated him in a way that no princess or noblewoman ever had. It was clear to him that Isabella had a heart of gold, untainted by the superficial desires that often clouded the nobility. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow across the river, Edward realized that he did not want the day to end. He felt a deep connection with Isabella, something far beyond mere attraction. It was as though, in her presence, he had found the peace and love he had been searching for his entire life. "I would like to see you again," Edward said, his voice earnest. "Would that be possible?" Isabella smiled softly. "I would be honored, Your Highness," she said, though her words were humble, as if the prospect of seeing him again was something she treasured deeply. Over the next few weeks, Edward found himself returning to the riverbank time and time again, eager to see Isabella. Each time they met, their conversations grew deeper, their bond stronger. Edward was enamored not only by her beauty but by her heart, a heart that radiated warmth and kindness. Isabella, too, grew fond of Edward, though she was initially hesitant to accept the affections of a prince. She had grown up among common folk, and the idea of being involved with someone so high above her station seemed impossible. Yet, as their friendship blossomed into something more, she could no longer deny the connection they shared. But their love was not meant to be without obstacles. One fateful day, Edward received troubling news from the village. Isabella had fallen ill. At first, it seemed like a common fever, but as the days passed, her condition worsened. The village healers had no cure, and word spread that she was unlikely to survive. Edward's heart sank. He could not bear the thought of losing her. He sought out the kingdom's most learned herbalists and scholars, desperate to find a way to save her. After many days of searching, he came upon an old woman who was known to possess knowledge of rare herbs and magical plants. She told Edward of a flower that grew deep within the enchanted forest, a rare lavender that had the power to heal even the gravest of ailments. The flower, however, was not easy to find. The forest was treacherous, filled with hidden dangers and dark creatures. Without hesitation, Edward decided to undertake the perilous journey. His love for Isabella was so strong that he would risk everything to save her. With determination in his heart, he set out into the forest, the dense trees closing in around him as he ventured deeper into the unknown. Days passed, and the path grew more dangerous with each step. The forest seemed to come alive with its own secrets, and Edward faced many trials. Thorny bushes that cut at his skin, dark shadows that followed him, and the ever-present feeling that he was being watched. Yet he pressed on, guided by the thought of Isabella and the hope that he could save her. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Edward stumbled upon a clearing. In the center of the glade, bathed in soft, ethereal light, was the lavender he sought. The flowers shimmered with a magical glow, their delicate purple petals standing out against the greenery of the forest. Edward could hardly believe his eyes. He carefully plucked the lavender, feeling its warmth in his hands as though it were alive with its own power. With the precious flower in hand, Edward made his way back to the village as quickly as he could, his heart pounding with hope. He found Isabella in her humble cottage, her face pale and drawn, her eyes barely open. The healer immediately prepared a potion from the lavender, and as Isabella drank it, Edward held his breath, watching her closely. Slowly, as though the life was returning to her with each passing second, Isabella's color returned. Her breathing steadied, and her eyes fluttered open. They locked with Edward's, and for the first time in what felt like ages, she smiled. Edward's heart swelled with joy. The woman he loved was alive. She was going to be okay. As Isabella regained her strength, word spread throughout the village of her miraculous recovery. The entire kingdom rejoiced, and the news reached the palace where Edward's father, King Aldrich, was pleased to see his son so happy. However, Edward knew that his joy was not due to his status as a prince, but because of the love he had found in Isabella. He asked for her hand in marriage, not out of duty, but because he loved her with all his heart. The wedding that followed was a celebration not only of their union, but of the purity of love that had brought them together. Edward made Isabella his queen, not for her wealth or her title, but for the beauty of her soul. Together, they ruled the kingdom, leading with compassion and kindness. Their reign was marked by a focus on the well-being of the people, and they proved that true love, love that comes from the heart, is the greatest treasure of all. And so, Prince Edward found the love he had always dreamed of, not in the opulence of his royal birth, but in the pure and selfless heart of a humble village girl. Together, they ruled, and the kingdom thrived under their reign, as their love blossomed like the rare lavender that had saved her life, a love that would endure for all time.